Yeah, it's interesting. It's less revenue, though there's a correlation versus number of employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so, 76% of the companies in the US, and I think those numbers are mirrored in other parts of the world. 76% of the companies in the United States are run by the lone entrepreneur. They don't even have a second employee. They're a solopreneur. And we like to kid some of those companies are even overstaffed. In other words, they ought to just go out of business and get a job. Okay?
Yeah.
But that's the bulk of companies. Then you get up to kind of about 10, which generally is $1 million in revenue, what it takes for you to get into EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. And what's interesting is between 0 and $1 million, if you look at the 4 key numbers, revenue, gross margin, profit, and cash, I often ask audiences between 0 and $1 million, which one of those 4 is most important? And a lot of them guess cash because, you're always cash strapped, but not really. It's revenue. You just got to piece together as many deals as you can to get some momentum, to get off the launch pad. And cash, are you kidding? Hopefully one of your partners keeps their day job, or you're married to somebody who's still working, or you've borrowed from friends, families, and fools, or whatever the case is. You're just going to try to piece it together,
right,
hold it together, tape it together until you get to $1 million. So revenue is sell like hell is the thing. From $1 million then to 10 million, the next one that kicks in is actually cash, because growth sucks cash. $1 million to 10 is 10xing. And for you to 10x again, you got to go from 10 million to 100 million. And that gets you into rarefied space. So the $1 million to 10 is when you really want to figure out your cash model. How are we actually going to fuel this thing? Through customer deposits or Costco, through membership fees or advanced deposits, or our SaaS offering, we're collecting the entire monthly, a year in advance. How are you going to go about, or you get deep pockets like John Ratliff did with his bank in order to grow through acquisition. So, but you're expected between $1 million and 10 to figure out the cash flow model. Then from 10 million to 50 million, the focus is gross margin. Because as I mentioned, at about 10 million, you're at 50 employees and everybody's name.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start getting above about 50, it gets crazy and you start piling on costs, and you got some middle management, and now you're getting price pressure because you've proven that there's this market for what you do, and now competitors are coming in, and your margins really start to get squeezed. And by the way, they squeeze about 4%. So if you were running 53% gross margin, it drops to 49. It doesn't seem like much, but 4% of 10 million is 400,000. And that's the money that you need for the better computer system, or to get an upgraded CFO, or bring in some more talent in general, or training and development, or better office space. And you need that. And at 50 million, that's an extra 2 million to the bottom line. So what we like to see is really push companies to get an extra 4% gross margin, a lot of it through pricing and clever pricing strategies, instead of lose that 4%. So it's an 8% that is real money. And then at 50 million, not that profit hasn't been important all along. It sure wasn't important at Amazon for a long time. But where you earn, we like to say the medium bucks, is creating a consistent profitability. By 50 million, you're expected to have this thing so figured out that you can create a consistent profitability in a wildly inconsistent market or world like what we've just experienced. And that's when you know that you have a deep understanding, control of the business that you're running. So revenue, then cash, then gross margin, and then profit in terms of focus. And those are just some of the things that change the evolutions and revolutions as the organization scales.
Super interesting. I like your pricing strategy point of you can get it through pricing strategy, because I think the first thing that people would think about is we'll have to change something in terms of how we operate. But what you just said just before is with more sophisticated pricing, you can actually just get that increase in gross margin immediately, just by being able to present price in a way that Robert Cialdini suggested,
Yeah.
to give them the option. That's really interesting.
The other place is then on process. The other issue with scale ups that we deal with is they get so focused on trying to get these great running functions. We've finally got a well-oiled marketing machine and sales and operations and HR and IT and finance. But what they don't realize is that's not how the customer experiences the company. The way it's experienced is through processes that cut across those functions. And I have to say that as entrepreneurs, we're sloppy. And the first place we're sloppy is we have a tendency just to throw bodies at the problem. We just throw people at it. And as a result, that's why our gross margins get crushed and the complexity goes up. So I'll tell you a quick story there. So Ken Sim, who ran for mayor of Vancouver, lost by 1,000 votes. My buddy Kevin Dom, who I was just on with, has been coaching him, and he's going to go back at it again and see if he can make up those 900 and some votes and become mayor. But he founded a company called Nurse Next Door. It's one of our fastest growing franchises in North America. It's one of these businesses where you have an elderly parent, you'd rather have a nurse come to their home than put them in a nursing home. And so he's doubling in size. And at the point where he had like 28 employees at headquarters, had hundreds of nurses in the field, his head of payroll comes into his office. And this is what happens to entrepreneurs every day. His head of payroll comes in and says, Ken, I'm buried. I'm trying to keep track of these hundreds of nurses and get their time cards in and get them paid. And I'm working 80-hour weeks and you want to double the company again in size. I need some help. Now, any rational CEO is just going to say, well, go get somebody, but not Ken. Ken goes, all right, let's bring in a lean consultant. And I'll give you a long story short. A year later, they doubled in size, any way you want to measure it. Yet their headcount dropped actually from 28 at headquarters to 23. They didn't fire anybody. They lost a couple through natural attrition. It happens when you're growing at that rate. And a couple others said, hey, I'm just going out in the field. And the great day was when his head of payroll comes in and says, Ken, not going to believe it, but I can barely find 30 hours now to keep me busy. What else can I work on? And that's what you want. They literally were doing twice the work in less than half the time. It was a 4X. And it wasn't just in payroll. They would struggle, Alex, in trying to bring on one new franchisee a month. Once they streamlined the process of doing that, they could bring on 5 a month without breaking a sweat. And so we literally have this much slop inside most of our organizations because we've just been throwing bodies and not cleaning out the closets, the hallway closets and garages, which is the analogy I use for process. You clean the garage, you clean the closet, give it 6 months, it's junked up again, and you either need a bigger closet, which is going to crush your gross margin, or clean it out. And so that's why process improvement is critical.
And I noticed that at the different stages of staff size, what it took to get to 1 million is different to what it takes to get to 10 million in terms of however you made it happen is messy. It's just messy. And then you get to a point when it doesn't work anymore and you have to change because it cannot support that size of revenue in terms of the older systems. And so there are key points that happens. And is that at staff size? Is it like at 10 staff, 25 staff, at 50 staff, where you need to change how the staff are actually communicating with across their teams and the processes around it? Is that kind of what needs to happen, that there's certain shifts that happen at certain stages of growth?
It is. And a lot of it has to do with the team size. It's why Jeff Bezos, often kids about the 2 pizza team, but you really don't want a team get any bigger than what 2 pizzas can feed. We've learned that the ideal team size is about 4 to 5 people. And if you start to add that 5th, 6th, 7th, all it does is drive productivity down and costs up. And so those are the kind of things in organizational design and others that you want to be cognizant of. And what's interesting is most folks haven't been educated around just these kind of fundamentals. And that's what you end up learning at the hard way is what happens. So yeah, staff size is the size and the number of people really is a key driver of when you need to make certain changes.